Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, thanks for stopping by. My name is Alicia. I post new tutorials every Thursday, and sometimes I try to put another one out during the week or on the weekend if I have time to do it. So this week's video focuses on making a dragon scale cup using the bubble and UV resin technique. This was requested by one of my subscribers and one of my group members for GMI, and I'm showing you only the backside because I want you to be surprised when I start doing this. The whole picture, although I'm going to post in the thumbnail, you're going to see the picture anyway. But so I am recording this after, and I record all my intros after I finish my cups so that I can talk about what I'm doing. So I want to tell you that, you know, this is a tutorial. So I'm showing you how to do this, but I'm also showing you a bunch of mistakes that I made and things that I tried differently and how to fix them. So this is really a true tutorial about how to do it and how to fix your mistakes. So if you're interested to see my hot mess of a cup that actually turned out really great, stick around and I'm gonna go ahead and get started. All right, so while my cup is drying, which is a 20-ounce Skinny Straight by Flow, I am going to decide what color mica powder I want to use for my scales. And so what I did was, to test each color out, I painted a popsicle stick black and then went over it with the mica powder so that I could get an idea of what it was going to look like. And so I do this with 5 different colors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, 5 different colors. And I don't think I'm going to show you all this. I'm trying to keep this video from being ridiculous long, but as I'm talking, I am showing you all of this. And I'm showing you the Lorena is a different brand, and that's actually my favorite color shift. It's a purple to blue. But ultimately, I did not decide on doing that one. I am going to do this. It's a pink to green shift is the one I chose in the end to use for the scales and for the eyes. And then I'm going to use that yellow citrine color in the eyeballs. So once I've picked out what I'm going to do, I am going to grab a fine makeup brush, and I'm going to pounce in the brush on and pounce in, because this has got like a lot of craters in around the eyeballs. So I start with doing black in the centers for the pupils, which, you know what, you don't need to do that because you're going to pour my black, oh my goodness, black epoxy, so you don't really need to do that. So you can skip this step. And then after I go in with that black, then, and to clean up, if it gets messy and it kind of spreads around and you don't want it, you can just take a Q-tip and alcohol to wipe it down. And then once that's nice and clean and dry, then you can go in with your next mica powders, which what I'm going to come in with is that citrine in the eyeballs, because I want that to be yellow. And so I'm just using a small paintbrush, or yeah, this is a paintbrush or a makeup brush, whatever you've got on hand. And I'm just going to paint that in on both sides. Once I'm happy with the coverage of the citrine, now I'm going to come in with my pink to green shift. And this is where I'm going to really pounce in, because there's all these craters in this mold. So I want to make sure that they get in there. So I'm just going to pounce in and get nice good coverage in there and around the sides. And I'm going to do this obviously for both sides, but I'm going to skip forward to the next step. All right, so I'm going to move on to the claw part, and I am going to take that citrine yellow mica powder. I'm going to go in and paint the claws with that, and then I'm going to pounce in the pink to green color shift in the rest of it. And then once that's all done, both the eyes and the claws, then I'll be ready to pour my resin. All right, guys, don't kill me, but I forget how much resin I mixed up. I'm going to say probably like 50 mLs to fill both molds. And so I've already mixed my resin up, and now I'm just showing you how much mica powder I'm putting in. Just make sure you get a good saturation. That black gets, you know, pretty good coverage, and it is a solid black. It is not like pearly or anything like that. It's just black mica powder. And so you want to make sure you mix up your mica powders really, really well. They can clump, and you don't want that. You don't want any clumpiness. But you can fix it if you have that problem. And I did not have that problem. So I just want to make sure that you know that that was not an issue for me. I'll let you know when I'm having my issues. What I did with this though, so here is where I made the mistake. Instead of using regular epoxy, regular set epoxy where it takes 8 to 12 hours, I tried using a quick set epoxy because I was trying to speed this up, and that's a big fat no-no, because what happened, and I will show you, is that you know, you've got a sweet spot for timing as far as adhering it to your cup and it being pliable to bend around your cup. And when you do the fast set, it seems to go really from like gooey to hard, like in a blink of an eye. And it just did not work out. So guys, don't try to speed this up. Make sure you use your regular set epoxy, because I wound up doing this once, and then I had to do the regular set epoxy, so then that took more time, and then I even screwed that up because I waited too long because I wasn't feeling well, and I waited too long 2 times, so it was like a big hot mess. So just make sure that you don't try to do a fast set epoxy because you could run into problems like I did. So here I am just pouring it in the molds, and I do wind up overflowing on the eyeballs, and that's okay. Just make sure you're on a piece of paper or silicone mat to catch it, because when you go to pull it off when it's still soft, the extra that falls over the sides is going to peel right off, and so it shouldn't be an issue. So while that is setting, I'm going to mix up my water with my Dawn dish soap, and I'll be ready to start scaling this cup. So you can use whatever your favorite UV resin is. If you're not sure, just, you know, find one that is reasonably priced and give it a go. I'm going to put 20 mLs in a medicine cup. Once you got that all measured out, now you're going to put in your mica powder. You're going to put a scoop. You're going to stir it around until it looks like you've got a good saturation, and then it is ready to be applied to your cup. So make sure you give, you know, it's stirred up and it's mixed up really well. You don't want any mica clumps, because that could be a problem when you're spreading it on your cup. All right, so that's all mixed up, and I've got myself a flat silicone spreader. And now here comes the fun. You're going to take your cup, you're going to blow bubbles in it, get it all started and ready, and now you're going to take your mica powder, UV resin, and you're going to spread it on the cup, and you're going to do not too much at a time. You're going to do this in sections. So you're going to do like 2 widths, or I do 2 widths of the spreader at a time. I don't do any more than that, because it's better to do it in small sections. And so now you're just going to blow your bubbles, and you're going to take your bubbles and you're going to spread it out onto that UV resin. And you know, you can do bigger bubbles, you can do smaller bubbles, whatever, you know, you like. You know, it's completely up to you, but I use kind of like big and small. And then you're going to take your light and you're going to cure that through the bubbles, and you're going to hold that on there for a couple of minutes until those bubbles are pretty much all done and popped. And then once they're kind of like done and popped, you know, just kind of stick your finger on it, make sure that it seems like it's cured before you move on to the next step. All right, so that section is nice and cured, and I'm just kind of wiping off the bubbles, and I'm just going to speed this up for you and put on some wonderful iMovie music. I'm going to spread some UV resin on the bottom, but I'm not going to bubble this because it will make it uneven. So I just want to coat it just so that it matches. And actually, it's easier to spread it on with your finger than with that flat spatula because of the uneven bottom. And then I'm just going to cure it as is, and I'm not going to do anything more to the bottom. All right, so at this point, it was an hour from when I poured, and I wanted to try to unmold. I was able to unmold the claws. Look how pretty that is. And they were still a little soft. I probably should have left them in a little bit longer. And so I placed them on the mat, and they were a little tiny bit tacky, so I had to use like a scraper to kind of get it up off the mat. So it was a little too early. And then I went in for the eyes, and I peeled it off the paper and just got the excess off that was around the bottom of the eye mold, but left them in there because they were definitely too soft. Like I could touch it. It was like dry to the touch, but it was definitely way too soft and pliable. So so I let it sit for another half an hour, and then I came back and it was ready to take out of its mold. Now, this is where I messed up because this is where I used the quick set epoxy. So at this point it was, it seemed to be still too pliable. And so I went and I let it sit for a half an hour, which, was too much because then it became unworkable. All right, guys, now it's been an hour and a half. So this is ready to be unmolded. All right, so these eyes are not as yellow as I want, but that's okay, we can fix that. So now we need to get this on our cup. And so it needs to so this part's probably going to stretch and break off and break apart, and that's okay. So it might even actually be easier. I can kind of butt it up against each other again, and you're not going to notice that. But we need to get this to go around. And see, that's why there's that sweet spot of between it being too cured, not cured enough. And this is pushing it. So what we can do to help that along is to soften it up to get it to go around a little bit better. Is take a heat gun and heat the back of it to make it more pliable. Put some heat on it, because heat softens epoxy. All right. So how am I going to attach this to my cup? Because it's actually cured a little bit more. So like in my last video, it was still like sticky. This is not really sticky. So what I'm going to do is two things. I'm going to use E6000 and I'm going to use hot glue to attach these to the cup. All right, so I'm going to put some E6000 on here. And then for the instant, I'm going to put some hot glue. Oh, it'd help if I had hot glue in there, right? So throw in a stick, and now I'm going to do the hot glue over top of the E6000 so that this gives it the instant stick. So wherever you put this, this is where it's going, guys. All right, so what's going on here is that it cured too quick. So I missed that spot where, the sweet spot that I keep talking about, where it's cured enough to handle, but still kind of sticky that it would apply to the cup. And honestly, I don't even know if it's the sweet spot I missed or just because it cured too, like, because it's the fast set resin, that there is even a sweet spot in there. So I'm thinking that there probably isn't with this resin because it cures quicker and it cures differently than a regular set where after 8 to 12 hours, you've got this pliability that you can work with, and it makes it so that it sticks to other surfaces. So I'm feeling like you're not getting that with this fast set epoxy. So I do keep trying here, but using my heat gun and softening it up. And I still keep trying to mold it around the cup, but it's not sticking at all. And then I'm like, oh, well, let me do the E6000 and let me, for the long haul cure, and then let me just do the hot glue for the the instant freeze. But what was happening is the hot glue wasn't strong enough to mold it around the cup, and what it was doing was pulling the UV resin off of the cup. So now here you are with the UV resin coming off of your cup after you spent all that time curing and bubbling and all that stuff. But I promise you, it is not ruined. It can be fixed. But in your brain at the moment, in my brain, I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do to this cup? So, I'm going to like rubber band it around, and then I'm going to like leave it to cure. And then I finally realized, you know what, this is just not going to work. I've destroyed some of it underneath. This rubber band is not strong enough. And this is I've just missed that point. So I am going to scrap that, and I am going to re-pour my eyes and my claws. All right, so after I poured my second set of eyes and claws, I decided I'm going to give this a coat of, now you can do epoxy, but I want to feel the scales. So really what I'm using is, instead of a real thin layer of epoxy, I'm actually using something like Crystal. So it's made by Starcraft, and so it's the same as that bright tone. And I'm going to put 2 coats on this cup before I go mess with it again. All right, so here is eye set number 2, and actually, I'm sorry, this is eye set number 3, because eye set number 2, I wound up going past the sweet spot again, and so then I wound up with an extra set. So this is actually number 3. So I finally got it timed correctly, and it's at that perfect pliability where it's going to stay molded around the cup and stop springing back and destroying and damaging the cup. So I'm placing this around the bulk of what came off of the cup, so where the black spots are. Now, it doesn't cover it completely because, I really made a hot mess of that, but it's okay. Like I said, I promise you we're going to fix that. All right, so I got these eyes placed where I want it, and I'm just going to peel them back and throw some E6000 and hot glue on it again to make sure that these do not lift up, which they probably won't, but I'm just better be safe than sorry, because I've already had some issues with this cup and I don't want any more issues, so I want to make sure that it sticks. So I am going to apply it, like I said, with the E6000, and there's my hot glue. And I am going to do this for both the claws and the eyes, because the claws, were the same thing. I went through 2 other sets before I finally got it to, that perfect point. And I'm so sorry, guys. I am out of frame. I am just putting some hot glue on the back side, and then I'm just pushing it around again and pushing it on there, and it's going to stick nice and good. I don't need to even really wrap it with anything. All right, so once I get all those edges pressed down nice, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the same thing with my claws. So I am going to do 2 sets of these claws, because I see people doing them where they're like kind of sideways and they're like pointing like upwards. And for me, it doesn't make sense. For me, it makes sense to have 2 sets, 1 for each eye, and the claws facing down. So more like it's to look like that it's looking at you, and its claws, are pointing down, and like it's getting ready to pounce on you or something. So that's my vision. You can do it any way you want, but that's how I felt it was gonna look the best for me. Now, keep in mind, though, when you put these claws down at the bottom of the cup, this is not going to fit in your cup holder anymore. So this is really going to be like either a home cup, or you're going to ride with this between your legs to work. So just make sure you know that. And I'm going to have 2 sets, so it's going to be doubled down with not fitting it in my cup holder. But so these claws, again, are nice and pliable. And let me just reiterate that I used my regular set epoxy. So after 8 hours, I checked it and it was pliable enough to do, to work this. Now, you want to make sure that whatever resin you're using, that you pay attention to cure times and start checking it after, I would say, 6 hours. Start checking it at that 6 hour mark and then the 8 hour mark and see your pliability. So this is a very time sensitive cup. So be prepared to babysit your epoxy and make sure that your timing is just right, and set your alarms for that 6 hour or 8 hour mark, or whenever you think that your epoxy is going to be workable. The only other issue that you're going to have is the edges of the eyes are going to want to lift up a little bit because they're so thin. So you can just take your little dotting tool or something very skinny and put some glue on it and stick it underneath and then press it down, and you shouldn't have any issues. It should stick down and stay for you. And if you have any further issues, you can fill it in with some hot glue, which I will do later and show you that. All right, so after I poured and set my second set of claws, I'm going to come in, and this is where we're going to do the touch-ups, and we're going to fix our mistakes where the UV resin pulled up. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking some Aliens Tack It over and over, and I'm putting it on all the places that I want to apply mica powder to cover up that black, and so to blend in back the mica powders and get rid of those black mess up spots. So you know what, you don't need to come in with the bubbles again, because the bubbles are uneven. You've got big bubbles, you've got little bubbles, you've got all different sizes and textures going on. So really, when you do this, it's just going to add to the character of the cup, because dragons are kind of irregular, if you will, if they've been in fights and they've got scars and stuff. So this is really so that's like the biggest spot right over there where I just did. And make sure that your Aliens Tack It over and over dries. Now, if you're not used to working with Aliens Tack It over and over, it goes on white and it dries clear. So you want to make sure it's nice and dry. And then this is when, once it's done, you can come in with your, your mica powder and start doing your touch-ups. And also the the dry time for the Aliens Tack It over and over depends on your area. So you can, check it after 10 minutes. You can actually, use a heat gun or a blow dryer to speed it up. But again, you want to make sure that it's nice and tacky and dry, because it will clump up your mica powders if it's wet, and you don't want that. You want to smooth this out and blend this as much as you can, because we're already fixing our mistakes. All right, so once I got that mica powder all touched up, now this is where I'm going to start working on the details of the eyes. So I'm going to blacken up those centers. I'm going to use black acrylic paint. You could also use a Sharpie marker and go in there and just, blacken that up if you want. You don't have to use acrylic paint. I find Sharpie works really, really well. It also works really well when you're trying to touch up other areas. All right, so now what I'm doing is the yellow in the eyes and on the claws is kind of muted for me. I want it to be brighter, so I'm going to come in again with my Aliens Tack It over and over, and I'm going to paint the areas that I want to put the yellow mica powder on. And then once that is dry, I am going to come in with the yellow mica powder, and I'm just going to go over it. And this is going to brighten these areas up. Once I'm done applying that mica powder, I'm going to seal it in with some polyacrylic, and I'm just going to dab it on and make sure that I get good coverage over that mica powder, because I don't want it to come off when I start to paint the other details in the eyes. I let my polyacrylic dry for about an hour. I wanted to make sure it was good and dry before I went in and started with the details on my eyes. So I'm going to use some red, and I really play around with this for a while. And so, this is a matter of technique, and it's a matter of preference. as to, you know, what kind of effect you're looking for. And I'm looking to get sort of this feathered effect with the red. And so I come in with this dotting tool and I go over it with the paintbrush, and I do this on both sides, and then I come in with yellow, and then I come in with white. So, you know, I don't know that there's a right or wrong. I'm no expert in painting by any means. I've painted plenty of dragon eyes. Do I think they're perfect? No, but they work for me. So you can, you know, really I suggest, if you're not familiar, like if you're not good at painting like I am, and you don't really have a great eye, because I don't have a great eye for painting, and that's why I don't paint. And usually that's why I use other people's graphics, but for these eyeballs I really can't do that. So I've got to fake the funk here, guys, so and do the best I can. So I did have like a little hair that was hanging off that brush that I did clip off. So make sure your brush, you're using a thin, you know, a narrow tipped brush when you're doing this. I've got the dotting tool, and you can clean this off easily. If you make a mistake, you can clean it off with just some water, as long as it's still wet or a little bit damp. Water and a Q-tip will take it off nice and easy. So it's easily fixable when you're working with it. So if you go over too much, or you know, you hit a spot that you didn't want to. And really, so I'm just, you know, I'm going to go through this, and I'm sorry guys, because I know this video is going to be really long, but there's a lot of details in this, and, you know, I don't want to skip out and speed up too much. I don't want to bore you to death, but, you know, I don't want you to have a lot of questions when, you know, I'm finished with this cup. So I apologize for the length of time it takes me to do this, but again, I don't want to skip out. So here, what I'm doing is I'm taking black Sharpie, because remember I told you you can use black Sharpie, and I'm outlining the eyes, and I feel like that was just giving the eyes a little bit extra pop. It's just kind of give that black, like, you know, if a model would put like black eyeliner around her eyes to highlight her eyes. It's kind of the idea of what I'm going for. And just really lightly, I don't go crazy, and I don't make it really thick. It's just enough to, you know, make them pop. So, you know, again, this is optional. You can do it, you cannot do it. It's completely up to you and the kind of look. You don't even have to use these colors if you don't like the yellow. If you want to go with red eyes with the yellow, I've done that too. You know, and if you, whatever color you want, guys. So, you know, the sky's the limit. So after that red acrylic paint dries, and sorry, I forgot to mention that I was using acrylic paint, I'm going to come in with some yellow. And so again, this is more of me trying to kind of feather and blend these colors to make those like natural lines and, you know, around the pupils. And, you know, I do this again with the paintbrush and the dotting tool, and I'm messing around with it. And, you know, I just really played with these for a while, and I think this was probably the longest part of doing this cup, was messing with the eyes and blending and getting the look that I wanted. So I think I'm gonna let you guys, I'm not gonna speed through, like I'm gonna speed through this, but I'm gonna not chop it out so that you can see exactly what I did. And if you don't want to, you can just skip through it, obviously. But I just want to show you, you know, every step in how I got to where the eyes look the way they look. So while the eyeballs and the acrylic paint are drying, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix a few more mistakes. So using a hot glue gun with black hot glue is perfect for filling in these gaps around the cups where it didn't seal up really well. So I take this dotting tool, so you let it dry for, a few seconds, and then you go in and you dot it, and you just pushing this hot glue into place, filling those gaps. Meanwhile, you're using that dotting tool to give the black hot glue some texture. So this is a little hack, guys, that I found works really, really well. And then after I do that, I'm going to go in with, guess what, my tack it, Aliens tack it over and over, and then I'm going to come in with my mica powder and I'm going to touch all that up, and you're never even going to know that there was gaps. And here I am with the Aliens tack it over and over, and again, going to be a broken record. You're going to come in with this Aliens and you're going to paint it over all that black hot glue. It's going to go on white. Make sure it dries completely clear. That's how you know it's completely dry before you go and apply your mica powders. Again, you do not want your mica powders going on when it's wet, because they will clump up, and then that's not the look that you're going for. Although, with all of the texture going on in the eyes, you probably wouldn't even notice it, but let's not do that, guys. Let's do it the right way. We're going to let this dry because we've already had to fix some mistakes, or I'm talking like we are making mistakes, because this is all my mistakes and me telling you how to fix my mistakes. So, and then once that is dry, here we go with the mica powder and a little brush, and we're just going to pounce that in and get it all nice and covered. And I'm so happy that, this is really working to fix my mistake. And like I did before, after I'm done applying all of my mica powder, I am going to come in with a brush, a soft bristle brush, and polyacrylic, and I'm going to just go over the eyes and make sure I seal in all of that mica powder. I don't want anything to happen to the mica powder once I start applying the epoxy, so this is going to be a good way to seal it in. You could probably spray seal this with either 2x Rust-Oleum's Ultra Matte, or even the Gloss Clear or Satin, whatever you have on hand. I just like polyacrylic because it's really cold outside right now, so I'm not taking anything outside and spraying it. So this is working best for me. But, you can do whatever works for you at the time that you're doing a cup like this. All right, so when I'm done sealing all of this mica powder in, including the claws and any other touch-up spots, it's going to be ready for its first coat of epoxy after about a good hour of dry time. Make sure that your polyacrylic is good and dry, because if you don't, it's gonna cloud up your epoxy. So I've mixed up 20 mLs of my Part A, Part B. I'm using a quick set epoxy on this first layer, and I am applying it using my finger, and I am just really doing a super light coat. The reason why I'm doing a super light coat is because I want to feel the texture, guys. There's texture in this cup, and these actually, the bubble texture is like kind of rough, and some of it's even sharp. So what I want to do is come in and do one coat of epoxy, let that dry, and then I'm going to give it a light sand, because I still want to feel the bumps, but I don't want the sharpness. So I'm going to go around the entire cup, and I'm just going to put, like I said, a very light coat of epoxy on. But I'm doing it on the cup. I'm not doing the claws yet, and I'm not doing the eyes yet. And I want to make sure that I get up against the eyes, but very, very lightly, because epoxy will pull around these 3D pieces. So you don't want it to pull too much, because then you're going to see it, and you really don't want to see that. You want it to seal. You want the epoxy to seal in this 3D and make sure it's good and sealed to the cup, but you don't want it to pull around it. So I'm going to go all around the cup, and I'm going to, just make sure that there's no pooling going on. And then after I'm done that, I am going to take off my glove, and I'm going to grab a brush, a soft bristle brush, and I'm going to dip it in the epoxy, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to brush it on the claws and the eyes. And so with the eyes, I'm going to kind of pounce it in there. I'm going to brush it on the eyeballs, again, using a super thin layer. And then I'm going to go over the eyes. And you don't need to go too crazy. You don't want it to be too thick, because remember, this is epoxy with the mica powder that's already sealed in. So I'm just really giving it I'm shining it up a little bit. And getting around those edges, making sure it's getting, that sealed to the cup, if that makes sense. It's like I feel kind of like I'm not explaining this the right way, but you see like how I'm going in with my brush on an angle and getting in all those cracks and crevices. So after it's been cured for a couple of hours, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to give it this light sand now, like I said. After the sanding, I wash it with Dawn dish soap, dry it completely, let it dry for about an hour, make sure there's no wetness. And now here I am coming in again, and I'm doing exactly what I did with the first coat of epoxy. This is going to be my last coat of epoxy, and I am using my regular set, so it takes 8 to 12 hours to touch, and then about 24 to 72 hours, or I guess it's 72 hours to fully cure. So again, same exact technique that I used when I applied the first coat. I'm going to go in with my fingers, and then I'm not even going to go over the eyes and the claws again. I'm just really going around the cup because I had sanded it, and I want to shine it all back up and make sure there's no super spiky parts, which there is not. I didn't miss anything. So after this is cured, guys, this cup is done, and I'm going to be ready for my final remarks. Boy, what a labor of love, guys. If you stuck through me with this whole thing, kudos to you guys, and thank you so much. All right, people, this cup is done. So after, really making some big mistakes, but learning, it was learning experience for me. Knowing now that, trying to speed this process up by using a quick set resin is a big old no-no. Because what happens is the center cures quicker and it gets harder faster, and so it's not as pliable. And I really was apprehensive about putting heat. Sometimes you can put heat on epoxy and you can soften it up. I really didn't want to do that. So I scrapped it, and I went through this a couple times where I waited too long, and on my regular epoxy. So I really, this cup was a challenge for me. It took me 2 weeks to finish because of things. I went and I wasn't feeling good for a day, and I poured epoxy and wound up sleeping through that sweet spot. So I wound up making, and I'm going to show you a picture. I actually made, and I should probably bring this up here and show you, I made a canvas using the ones that I oopsed on. So I'm hanging that, so I have a dragon scale canvas on my wall now. So guys, so learn from my mistakes. Don't do the things that I did, and your cup should go smoother. But overall, I am super happy with how it turned out. I love dragons, and I love this cup, and my girls at work, they love this too. So I think I did a good job on it, guys. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you would do different. So that is it for this, guys. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you give me a thumbs up, subscribe, share, comment, and I will see you. Oh, and don't forget to check out my Facebook pages. It's a crafting, and also the GMI Superstars. And you can also follow me on Instagram. All right, guys. See you next time. Bye.